As far as I am concerned, we were sent out to France with generals who are fighting this war like they fought the First World War. Our personal weapons were a number 1 303 Lee Enfield rifle and an 18-inch bayonet, the same weapons we had in the Great War 22 years before. Against German armour, we had a 2-pound anti-tank gun and the boys' anti-tank rifle, and I can tell you that wouldn't have put a hole in my tin mug, let alone a Panzer tank. In early May, the Germans struck, and we didn't know what had hit us. Their armour, plus the Luftwaffe, just swept us towards the coast. I first became aware that something was going wrong when we were called out on parade on the 26th. The commanding officer informed us that the whole British expeditionary force was retreating. Carry what you can, leave the rest, and head for Dunkirk. Dunkirk? I'd never heard of it. So the trek began, carrying only small pack, gas masks, and our arms. Still, even at this stage, most of us thought we were drawing the enemy into a trap and that sooner or later we'd turn on him and give him a dose of his own medicine. But in 2 days we were scattered by the incessant bombing, which forced us off the road into the wet ditches on either side, which also contained loads of stinging nettles. One Stuka came so low we fired our 303s at it, and my mate John Mannion was enjoying blasting away at Jerry with his Bren gun until Pip Jacobs, our sergeant, shouted out, "Mannion, you silly twit, you firing tracer! You'll bring the bloody lot down on us!" The task of clearing the roads is one I shall never forget. They were littered with military carnage. Dead, blown, shattered horses. Some still kicking in pain. Civilians, old and young, children and babies, all badly injured. Some with half the bodies blown away. All mown down by the Stukas. The French medics were putting them out their agonies. One sergeant, while clearing the road, kicked with seeming callousness the severed limb of a child into a ditch. The stench of explosives and rotting animals was awful. The roads were choked with fleeing refugees and retreating French and British soldiers. All the road signs had been taken down, but we came across a service corps officer and asked him, "Which direction's Dunkirk?" "Look for the pillar of smoke and follow the crowd, you'll get there." And sure enough, to the west we could see it, this great tower of smoke, and overhead the German planes weaving to avoid anti-aircraft gunfire. The huge petrol tanks of Dunkirk kept exploding in the distance, and at night the flames lit up the sky. Well, on the march, we came to a place called Popery, and even with what was going on, there was still some shops selling bread and cakes. Now, I remember Popery particularly for 2 reasons. Firstly, my father had been wounded there in the last war, and secondly, this old lady cursed and raved at us, calling us English pigs, in French and English. She certainly made no bones as to which side she was on. There seemed to be this age-old animosity between the French and the British, and, looking back on it, I think they had good reason not to like us after some of our activities. But later, another old French lady came up to us, and to her dress she had pinned a paper Union Jack. She carried a jug of hot water and a cup, into which she placed a sugar cube, mixed it with the hot water, and gave it to me, saying in broken English, "Drink it, son. It will keep you going. It did the same for your fathers in the First War." Well, I'll not forget her. As we got nearer Dunkirk, we came across transport of all kinds, hundreds like tanks, trucks, Bren gun carriers, hundreds of them, all in the ditches, engines smashed so the Germans couldn't use them, and really heavy guns still covered in grease from the First War. Hundreds of tons of ammunition, mortar bombs, artillery shells, and small arms cartridges. Then we came on a naffy wagon abandoned in the ditch. I think it must have been plundered by just about everyone who went past. Well, it was a godsend. But no one took too much, as it all had to be carried, and we were already loaded up with guns and equipment. We marched and marched. No, trudged would be a better word for it. If you've ever had to march loaded up with guns and equipment for days at a time, you'll know what I mean. Well, on the 29th of May, there was a thunderstorm and we got soaked. So we went into some evacuated cottages and lit a fire to dry off. We found some women's clothing that had been left by the civilians. So we wore them while our uniforms were drying. Well, the thing is, you see, the weather during the day was very hot and sunny all the time we were marching. And as we were all wearing army issue long johns, well, it meant that our crutches got all sore from the perspiration and constant rubbing. So I kept on some of the women's clothing under my battle dress. I don't know what would have happened if I'd have been captured. At intervals along the way, we were instructed by the military police to make our way to La Panne, 10 or 11 miles north of Dunkirk. And as we trudged on in the heat, our tongues began to swell through lack of water during the day. So we picked up some pebbles to suck. And when we finally reached La Panne, it was like a huge breaker's yard, with smashed lorries and motorbikes and dumped kit and equipment everywhere. We could see the masts of sunken ships all over, and on the beach there were signs of aircraft dogfight, with bits of shot down planes of both sides littering the sands. There were hastily prepared slip trenches, dug by those that had preceded us, and in quite a few of these trenches there were dead bodies or parts of them. It was a terrible, gruesome sight. And many of the blokes took refuge in the bomb craters in the long-held belief that it was a 1,000,000 to 1 chance that a bomb would land exactly in the same place twice. There were bodies washed up onto the beach with each wave, all covered in blood and diesel oil, as men and boats had been machine-gunned and bombed by the German planes. Along the beach, a pier of sorts had been made using lorries, no doubt run out onto the sand at low tide. And there were hundreds of soldiers, many up to the chests in the sea, waiting in the long lines for one of the small boats to pick them up and take them back to the ships. Now, the only way to get on one of these small boats was to join one of the queues at the water's edge. But each time I got to the head of one of these queues, it seemed like an enemy aircraft warning caused a mad 200-yard dash back to the dunes. So I lost my position. Well, several times I waited in the water whilst we were under attack, hoping that any shrapnel would be stopped by the water, until a youngster near me, who did the same thing, had half his cheek and jaw blown away. I didn't stay in the water again. Well, at about 5 p.m, we scrambled for a small boat offshore. We waded up to our necks to get on it. Small boat, 40 of us tried to board at once. You can imagine what happened. I went back to the dunes again, having lost my rifle this time. I already had visions of a court-martial when I got back to Blighty, although it's probably useless, as the sand had got into the barrel and breech. But luckily, I found a pair of dry battle-dress trousers in a Brent carrier, and much to my relief, a rifle. And as I sat down in the dunes, a bloke near me said, "Come on, let's go and find a meal. I don't mind getting blown up, but I'll be blowed if I'll starve to death." Well, that night, after a bit of a search, we had a supper of 1 cream cracker and marmalade each. My new mate and I crawled off into a ditch and lay against a log to sleep and wait till it was light. At dawn, we awoke to find that our log was in fact a dead horse. We moved off very fast. And as it became light, and the mists which made the nights very cold began to disperse, we could see the hundreds of leaflets dropped by the Germans, advising the men on the beaches to give up because the generals had gone home. Well, these led to rumours and pessimism and comments. Comments such as, we'll never get back, or they've deserted us. Particularly when we began to notice that the amount of small boats was getting fewer each day, and rumours that a U-boat had got in amongst them. I mean, many of the men's nerves gave way, leading to queue jumping, hustling to get onto small boats that were already overloaded, or claiming it was their turn before someone else. Another rumour arose that we were going to surrender. I mean, rumours like that caused panic. On one occasion, a young officer cracked, broke away from the evacuation queue, jumped onto a small boat that was loaded, refused to get out, and was shot to stop any panic that could easily have followed. Conditions got worse and worse as more and more weary troops flocked down among the dunes. Every half hour, ME-101s came to strafe or bomb. I mean, Le Pan was also under fire from medium to heavy artillery. There was little warning, as the shells just came whistling in on a flat trajectory across the sand to chop down the queues of waiting men. Nothing could be done. The queue simply moved up and closed the gap. Along the columns wandered the shell-shocked, fatigued, and demented. Things were made worse by packs of terrified dogs running along the beaches. Vicious and hungry, they searched for corpses among the dunes or dug up shallow graves that had been disturbed by the shell fire or the bombs. Another time, me and 20 others waded out into the sea again to try and get on a launch we'd seen. Again, I went up to my neck to get on it, but, the boat was too far away for me to swim for it, so I came back. My new mate tried and drowned. But it was at this time that I bumped into Tommy Ramshaw, who was in Secoy with me. But before we could say hello, we heard the sound of the rifles and the Brennan Lewis guns opening up as our lads fired furiously at the Luftwaffe roaring overhead. We poured lead at them as fast as we could reload. I don't think the planes were in much danger, but it was an act of defiance. Men near Tommy and me were badly injured. Tommy and me joined another queue, slowly edging our way along, ducking when the planes came over. Again, some men were killed or injured, but we stayed put up to our necks in the water. After an eternity, it was our turn to be picked up and pulled on deck of what I think was a hull trawler. I had to go down under the water to push Tommy up and over onto the boat, and apparently he was so relieved to have got aboard, he neglected the fact that I also needed assistance. Nevertheless, I was pulled on deck by a sailor who said, "Come on, Tommy, you've had enough for one day." About 90 of us were aboard when we cast out and drifted our way through the floating debris, which included a lot of our poor lads who didn't make it. Do you know, I have never appreciated anything so much as that mug of thick, sweet cocoa that was put into my hand. But we hadn't got far when we were attacked by 9 Stuka bombers. Packed like sardines, all we could do now was pray. Please, God, let the bombers miss us. Luckily, they did. And eventually we sidled out past the protective layer of the naval ships and looked back at that awful scene. If there is a place called hell in the hereafter, then those of us that have survived the beaches at Dunkirk don't need to fear it, because we've been there already.